Thanks very much to our panel for joining. But so I'm Mike Basnett-Sanford. I head up our partnership for Horsefly Talent Market Analytics. We are a platform that is providing real-time insights on the marketplace around skill sets, competitor analysis, gender, supply, demand, education, and salary within that whole talent market. And that's really to help businesses understand the landscape that they're working in before actually going out there to try and hire those people. And our data is aggregated from right the way across the social web. I'm really interested in hearing Neil talk about sort of where you're going to find people. We use a plethora of sources from the likes of GitHub, Stack Exchange, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere across that social web to pull that information in and give people the insights around where that talent they're looking to hire might be. We're a global business with data analytics right the way across Europe, US, LATAM, and Asia, and that's continually growing. So that's just a really quick intro from myself in terms of what we do. I just want to really introduce our panel today, and a huge thanks to some of our partners. As Fashion, we're talking about a data-driven strategy in hiring tech talent. Rich from Fibre, your recruitment delivery lead. Rich, we've worked together for many a year now. We've got Luke Toos from Admiral, and Luke's one of our newer partners. So great to have Luke involved, and also Bill Gill from the Home Office. And again, Bill has been a long-term sort of partner of Horsefly. And what I wanted to do today was, rather than kind of do a product demo really, but talk to our partners around some of the challenges that they've had, over this sort of, challenging period in the economy we've had, where they are today and what the future looks like. So I've got some questions and really going to be an interactive session, but I'm going to fire out to Luke first, and Bill and Rich, please do, jump in with sort of any of the points you've got. But Luke, you're one of our newest customers and partners that have come on board, and actually through quite a challenging time. So, I suppose the first question is how is data supported, and what changes have you had to make since the start of the year, and in what way has the data had an impact on you and the business?
Okay, thanks, Mike, for the intro. Yeah, it's been a bit of a turbulent year, to say the least, I think. So getting into the finer detail of things, we very quickly found ourselves in a global war for talent. Previously, we've been in Cardiff, and that's sort of where we've needed to recruit. We've never really been a remote recruiter prior to this. So it changed overnight for us. So as we know our competition inside out in Cardiff and the local surrounding area, we know how to sort of oppose offers or compete against those people in that market. We're very quickly up against the tech giants, with everybody working from home. Anybody can work anywhere in the world, and that's what we're seeing. So very quickly we had to change our style. So the data that's allowed us to do that has sort of centered around understanding what skill sets or what hotspots there are around the country. Using a platform like Horsefly has been a real sort of plus point for us in that space particularly. And that's led us to sort of hiring in those locations. So we struggle with a very competitive market in the tech space in Cardiff. So having the ability to search for skills across the UK is something that we've found very useful for us and something that we're continuing to do. I think on top of that, we've had an impact as a business and build on our brand name from scratch really across the UK now is something that we're working on. So we want to be seen as a viable tech employer. We want to, we've got a pretty decent reputation for the most part, I think, as an employer in general. But when you look at tech specifically, we share the same challenges as many other businesses and organizations as to how do we be seen and how can we be perceived as a strong tech employer. So we were comfortable in where we were going with that in Cardiff, and then all of a sudden again we've gone UK wide, and even in some cases it'll be further afield than that, I'm sure, in the future. So I think that comes hand in hand with things like understanding what salaries we need to pay based on location, as in the benefits as well, and the overall sort of employee experience and what others are offering around the UK. So I think in a nutshell, it is that sort of global market now, and that's the biggest impact that we've seen for us in the tech space when it comes to recruitment so far.
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks, Luke. And Rich, I mean, a similar sort of questions, but I suppose the same to you really, because I know, you know, we've spoken in different guises and different roles that you've done. So where with City Fibre in your role, how's that sort of impacted you?
I mean, some of the recruitment we do is location specific. We're building a full fibre network across the UK. So some of the stuff we're doing is very specifically aligned to the cities and towns that we're building in. But as Luke said, some of the other stuff is you know, we're much more now flexible about where someone can operate from. So some of our more technical roles, whilst typically may have been based in some of our hubs, we're now able to kind of target across the UK. So, you know, using the data to help us identify where the talent actually sits, to be much more targeted about where we can get the best talent at the right sort of price. It has been really useful for us. I think, you know, Luke's point about understanding salary, we want to be upper quartile payers in the market. We want to understand and make sure that we're competitive to attract the best talent into the organisation. And actually having access to real-time data around salary has enabled us to push our reward manager to look at our salary ranges that we offer. You know, our reward manager's done a load of work on pay grades and making sure that we are in that upper quartile, but we do still come across, you know, real examples where we're struggling to fulfil because we're not quite right. And having access to that data has really enabled us to push that agenda properly with our reward manager and make sure that we are continuing to provide competitive offerings to the candidate market. But I think the other thing for me is just you know, enabling us to plan ahead, knowing where we need to go and how and where the challenges are going to be, so that we can make sure that we're building our strategy ahead of the game, has been really massive for us. And, you know, actually COVID hasn't impacted us massively because we're still building the network, but we did have a period where we had a headcount freeze, and we were able to use that time to really drill down and understand the markets that we needed to be recruiting into, and really get ahead of the game, ready for when we were hitting the UK fairly significantly with a large volume of vacancies again.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rich. And I suppose it's really interesting and how different businesses have been impacted. And Bill, thanks for joining. I suppose one of my questions over to you, Bill, is, I mean, you know, it's the demand is always changing, you know, of a business, and the uncertainty we've all been through. What are the sort of the priorities and challenges that you're facing today? And again, similarly, you know, where's data playing a part in that?
Sure. So I'm with the Home Office. We're slightly different to some of your other presenters in the sense we're the public sector. So for us, part of the challenge for us that we've got is how do we ensure that we can actually continue to provide public services in an effective way, which also is more cost effective for the taxpayer. So by essence, we are moving to what we call digital by default. So as much as possible, government, including the Home Office, are striving to automate the way that citizens in the UK can interact with government and the services we provide. Now that places a huge challenge on us because obviously, traditionally, the Home Office, like other government departments, have been driven by face-to-face interactions with individuals. And to a degree, we're moving to online services as much as we can to offer those same services in much more expeditious and easier access routes for citizens, so they don't have to physically come into an office space to seek a service. Now that is placing a huge challenge on the department because we're having to expand our digital capability quite significantly, and it's continually evolving because obviously as we identify more services that we can potentially digitize or automate, we need to bring in those skill sets to bring into the department to help deliver that. Now, for us, the big challenge that we've got is we're facing the private sector, and we offer public sector salaries. Now, sometimes our salaries can be quite competitive, sometimes they can't be. It all depends on what the market situation is at that time. One thing that's interesting with COVID, and your data through Horsefly has helped give us that kind of information, is that currently supply is outstripping demand, in the sense that there are a lot more people out there looking for work than there are recruiters actually out there offering roles at the moment. So it's become a bit more of a buyer's market in that sense. But we are, for us, it's about how do we target, and it's very similar to what Luke has been saying as well, that it's using some of the data that you've been sharing through Horsefly with us to identify where are the areas we should be seeking to attract talent. Because traditionally we have been very centred on London and the Southeast, and that meant that we were cutting off potentially huge swathes of talent that choose not to move to those areas. So we are looking to change our footprint, so we've got more footprints in the north. So we're creating digital hubs in Sheffield and Manchester, but equally one of the things that we're looking to do as well is how do we become more attractive in the sense of not being so restricted to a specific location. So how do we offer remote working as a more viable long-term option to people who potentially could do the work remotely, because they don't have to physically work in an office to do the work we need them to do.
I think that's rings true with us as well, Bill. I think that's one of the challenges we've got, is that we're seeing many other employers being able to offer fully remote opportunities to people, and what we're seeing is, you know, the candidate market is very much up for that as well. I don't know if you're seeing the same across the roles that you're recruiting for, but ultimately the game has changed for us quite a lot in that sense as well.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that.
I would suspect this is a common thing that we're all encountering, is do we move away from the previous position of you must come into a specific office in a specific location, because that used to be the way we worked, and COVID has kind of brought forward all of those longer term aspirations to actually what's stopping us doing that, rather than, well, we can't do it, it's, well, why can't we do it?
Yeah,
it's a complete change, which suddenly doors are being opened in terms of how we choose to recruit, and people are willing to listen at a very senior level.
Yeah, I think there's the skepticism of people working from home and the reality of the fact that actually people are productive and deliver in that environment has gone. And actually that's shifted the balance, I think, of organisations, the way they think. You know, for us, we were already fairly remote as an organisation, but it's just reinforced the fact that we can target people where they are rather than where we want them to be, which, and you know, Horsefly enables us to identify where that is, which is pretty useful, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. It probably leads really nicely, sort of, I suppose, not necessarily the final question, but sort of one of the important things. I mean, that change in landscape, you know, the availability of talent is obviously really important. You've touched on that, remote working, but what about that? You know, Luke, you touched on it at the beginning, that competitor aspect. Is that, you know, it's opening up the door to different competitors that you perhaps never really thought about in the past, because when you are siloed to a certain location, that doesn't become perhaps a thought process. And how's the data then? I mean, and this is probably to all of you really, because Bill, you've touched on opening in Sheffield and you know, Manchester in terms of, you know, hubs. You know, how are you using the data to drive that future strategy, and the impact that everything has had so far?
Should I take that, or do you want Luke to?
You go for it, Bill. Go on, Bill. You
okay.
can take us away. Yeah.
So for us, so what we've been doing, we've obviously got your self-service tool that we utilise to kind of give us ideas of what the labour market situation is in those local areas, but also nationally, so we can consider local attraction strategies for those specific areas, but also more nationally in terms of remote working. Going forward as well, it gives us an indicator as well of what's our local competition then? Who are we actually competing against in those locales, who are going to be our immediate competitors? and what are the salaries that they're proposing to offer for the skill sets that we need. And that would be reflected in conversations we need to have internally with our rewards teams to say, well, here's the competition we're up against, what can we do? But it also feeds into our wider attraction strategy, because we do recognise as a public sector, in the digital market at least, we may not necessarily always be competitive on salary alone. So it's how do we promote why it's more beneficial to work for us than work in a private sector company. And for us, it's all about additional benefits that we can offer. So the fact that you get an opportunity to work on something that has an effect across the entire country, across the entire population, and sometimes more widely for some of the work that we do. The fact that you're actually developing services, IT, infrastructure that will support the government and the ability of the government to support its citizens in a really effective way, something that we think is something that hopefully will attract certain types of individuals to want to work for us as opposed to work in the private sector. And then, of course, there's the other non-tangible benefits that we can offer, you know, in terms of we have quite a attractive pension scheme for those that are interested. We do offer apprenticeships as well, because that's something that we are definitely interested in expanding upon, because I think a couple of other colleagues have also said, you know, we need to start developing our own talent in-house, because it's not good enough to just try and source people, it's build the talent, because we recognise, and we've seen this in apprenticeship schemes that we run outside of digital, that there's greater loyalty amongst people who come through the organisation, because they're more likely to want to work with you if they had their first opportunity with you and you've helped develop their skill sets. And we can offer quite a lot of non-digital skill sets as well, in terms of wider management, program, activity, etc., that we hope will actually fill out someone's CV quite a lot and might make us more attractive and kind of get us over that little salary issue, if that is the issue that we have to overcome.
Sure, Luke, and you touched on at the beginning again, you know, being based in Cardiff and the challenges that you've had in Cardiff, you know, sort of looking at that more UK wide and you touched on perhaps even globally in moving into the future. How's that how's the planning for that going ahead, and you know, how do you sort of compensate, I suppose, for those, you know, different competitors?
Yeah, so it all starts with our sort of company strategy, feeds down into our IT strategy, and then into my sort of area for workforce management planning. So we've got a funnel view that ties directly with our roadmap in terms of technology. So what skills are we looking for in the short, medium, and long term? So we've done a lot of work around that. And then Horsefly as a tool has been able to sort of supplement us and say, these skill sets are most popular in these areas. You can expect to pay this much money. You've got X amount of males, X amount of females in that space. So it's a little bit more wider reaching than just, oh, here's the information. We're actually using it to shape sort of our women in tech strategy. So we've utilized the platform to explore other and, you know, more talent pools than what we would have done or what we would have had access to before. I think making calculated decisions on the top universities that see females graduate from STEM subjects has been a huge part for us. That's built, you know, the foundations for our strategy for women in technology next year for Admiral. We're now reaching out to those universities, building relationships with them based on that key data. So I think that's something that we've been quite proud of, that we didn't really, it was like a hidden extra for us when we started thinking about the platform and how we can use it. Because being an insurance company, data is key for us across many different areas. A lot of our work starts with the research and analysis piece, and a lot of what we're doing mirrors what Bill has said. You know, I'm not going to go over those points in too much detail again, but building the brand and things like that are going to be huge for us, but knowing where to do it is key. And that then in turn controls spend, helps us control which partners we use to find the resource. Are we using the right agencies for the right resource? But furthermore, it helps us make sure that we can get the right people in the right roles at the right time. And that's for across the board, not just into roles in technology, but for our recruitment team. We've got an amazing recruitment team that, you know, constantly are are out there searching, and we have that proactive method of LinkedIn Recruiter and finding people ourselves ahead of the curve before it gets to the point where, oh, we needed that person yesterday, which has historically been the way that we've been working, but I think this proves that we can change, and we're adapting to new environments, and using data to support us along the way.
Perfect. And I think Tash is on. How are we doing on time, Tash? Have we got a couple of minutes left, or?
Yeah, no, so you've still got roughly sort of 10 minutes. We have had a couple of questions come in. One was just praising you, so we can do that one at the end. The other one was actually just around leadership. And it's a key question. Is you mentioned leadership, Bill, starting to listen now, which is great. How much of an impact does data have during leadership discussions? And actually, how do you have those discussions to get that stakeholder buy-in? Might be a really good question to answer, because I know that's a key one for everyone.
Yeah, I think data has been really critical, because without that, we haven't been able to basically evidence why we want to change our attraction strategy, but equally why we need to review our rewards policies as well for digital roles, but also other roles that we're looking at as well. It also influences our ability to explain why we need to enhance our current EVP and brand, because we do recognise people don't necessarily view the Home Office as like the first choice for digital roles. We need to get out there and actually explain to the digital market, actually, we are out there and we offer a huge variety of digital roles. That's something that we're trying to catch up on, so that we're viewed in a closer way to the private sector, in the sense that, yeah, Home Office should be one of those preferred choices for as an employer going forward. We know that's a major thing, but all of the data we've been gathering through Horsefly and other areas is we're using that to kind of justify the decisions at the top, and that's been really helpful, because it's meant that they're starting to buy into the concept of producing more labour market reports for roles that they find hard to fill, or for roles that they want to fill going forward, because it means we can build that into the attraction strategies for those skills. So that's been really helpful for us. For the first time, we've actually got data that can actually be used to get senior manager buy-in, and that's been the big change that I've seen over the last few months.
That's great. I suppose I had one question for Rich. I'm going to put you on the spot, because you've used Horsefly for a long time. But if there's one thing that you would say you've done differently from sort of beginning of the year and the challenges we've been through with COVID to now, what would you say that's been, moving forward and future strategy?
I know that's a big question, but so I get the biggest thing for me, and I echo a lot of what Luke said about the value of Horsefly and the insight that we're getting, and it's not just at a tech level, it's across our whole organization. But what I've really now got to the point of is I'm using the tool to plan for future, but it's enabling me to react to issues. I've now got people in the team that are using Horsefly, they're getting the insight, and then the final slide of their kind of presentation back to the business is actionable change, the things that we're actually going to do to influence solving the issue. It's great having access to data and insight, but if it doesn't actually generate any change or kind of deliverable actions, then it's not really doing much. But where I've really now got to with the team is that we're able to understand an issue and come up with 5 key things, 6 key things, whatever, that we're going to do differently to impact a different approach to ensure that we fill the role. And for me, that's the biggest impact that we've started to get out of the system is yes, I can plan for the future, yes, I can demonstrate insight to leadership and help justify our strategy, but actually at a tactical level, I can make real key changes to ensure that we fill the roles as quickly as possible. And that's what I massively love about where we are as a business now with the tool.
Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit to that, if that's okay as well, from my perspective. I think we've used it in a way to say, well, actually that skill set is going to cost us X amount, and we're finding that they're based quite far away from where we are. So we can factor that into a learning and development pathway. So we build career development for our own sort of employees. particularly around those technologies that are very difficult to find. We use some legacy technology and very difficult skill sets to find in insurance and in insurtechs. So I think having that and having the ability to say, well, rather than going out there and trying to hire these people and it costing us quite a lot of money through salaries, agency fees, and everything else that comes along with it, we can look at upskilling in certain areas. So for me, that's been an added benefit again for us to take to leadership. And so it's not just about, we're going to be recruiting these roles, here's the information. We can upskill our current employees as well off the back of that.
No, I think it's it's a brilliant build, borrow, and buy, isn't it? And I think that more often than not, that if you can't find, we're always thinking now, and I suppose the advantage of planning is that you can start to think about the strategy you talk about, Luke, and Bill and Rich as well, in terms of university partnerships and that next generation of talent coming through. And I also think that plays a big part in the gender piece as well, because we know, I've spoken to all of you, and Bill, you touch on it as well. Gender diversity is becoming, well, it's been around for a long time, and actually within the technology marketplace, there is only a certain amount of gender diversity. So how do we build that next generation? And I think you've touched on some of that as well.
Yeah, I think actually what the data you've been sharing with us through Horsefly has actually bizarrely reassured us in the department, because we're actually finding at the moment we're outperforming the general market of supply. That we know what the ratio of female digital specialists are, and at the moment we've got more females employed than than the data that's being presented to us nationally. So that's a positive, but equally we recognise that we shouldn't just accept that. We need to increase it so that there's greater parity between the genders going forward. And that there is that point that I think Richard and Luke have both said as well, about how do we increase our women in tech and what are going to be our initiatives. And I think that point about, do we go for people who've got all the experience, or do we go for the people who've only recently graduated and targeted those areas and build up their capability with us? That's something that I think might be something that might be more effective for us, bearing in mind we potentially might have less competitive starting salaries for people with less experience, but maybe we can offer something else to them.
Yeah, perfect.
Amazing. Guys, that was a really interesting panel discussion. We have had 2 quick questions, so just in the last 2 minutes we're going to try and whiz through them. So Mike, this might be one better directed to you. Is what support do you get, as analytics can be quite difficult to interpret, and I'm sure that's a feeling that a lot of people get. So
yeah,
is it just a spreadsheet?
Look, I think all of the guys on here will probably verify. Look, it's data is only as good as what you get out of it. It is actually how you interpret that, and the reason that Luke, Rich, and Bill are on is because with the support of a customer success team that we have, it is about making sure that we can upskill the relevant people within teams to interpret that data to make a change. And I think that's absolutely critical, that it's all well and good having a tool, but unless you've got that support to actually train you up, then it just becomes data, and that's the people are making the impact.
I think there's 2 bits actually. It's just only as good as the search, and then it's only as good as how you analyze the data. And I think the customer success team that we work with helps our team to really drill the search down properly, because you can create a high level view of a market, but it's not really a true reflection of what you're trying to look for, and that bit is critical. And then it's how do you analyze the data to make informed decisions, and that's how we've then got to that point where we're making actionable decisions off the back of it, because we understand the data rather than just presented with a bit of insight, and that's through, I guess, the customer success team that's enabled us to get to that point, I think.
And that's the end aim, isn't it? Being able to make those informed decisions off the back of that data. And a very quick one for you. So do you think remote working will drive up more women in tech with that added flexibility? We've run out of time, so just perhaps a quick yes/no response would be great from all of you.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill, so yes, you hope so. Okay, brilliant.
Yeah,
Richard?
why not?
Yes.
Yep. Luke?
Yeah.
Why not? Great response, Rich. Mike, what about yourself?
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Well, what a positive note to end on in that case.